think one of the most important parts of my research, when you really dig down into what I'm doing and thinking about, is actually a bit of optimism for the human species. When we look at the last 2 million years of what our lineage has been able to do, you end up talking a lot about cooperation, coordination, compassion, community, and a little bit of conflict. But how we've negotiated and met the challenges as a community, and how we're deeply wired to cooperate, to work together, to meet the challenges that the world throws at us, I think that has a lot of impact in people's daily lives, and it helps them think through the ups and downs that they experience. Looking back over the long durée of human evolution, 2 million years of it, we are really good at getting along, and I think that's an optimistic message about humanity. So in our part of the world, we tend to have this notion that there's something called secular and something called religious, that there's a division, right? One you do on Sundays, right? And the other you do the rest of the day, or rest of the time. It's not true. It's not true here. It's not true for the rest of the world. So I think one of the most important things is to get rid of those artificial boundaries and think with and through concepts together in a holistic way. So when people say, well, the clergy shouldn't be political, I don't think that's realistic. Why not? Because when you have knowledge, when you have deep faith, when you're thinking through what it means to be and to become human, you can't ignore massive environmental catastrophes, you can't ignore massive injustice in the world, or you can't ignore inequality in your own community. If you do that, it seems to me you're sort of making a mockery of the whole point of thinking through these things deeply and spiritually. Clergy, they already get this notion that cooperation and community is the center, that that's what people do. But being able to dialogue with scientists researching million-year-old fossil finds and archaeological sites, with scientists looking at how our neurobiology and hormones work, being able to see that there's science that engages with, thinks through, maybe goes hand in hand with some of the things that the clergy are dealing with on a daily and very, very practical, real basis, might offer new ways to think through these things and to engage not just their communities, but also to deeply reflect on why we find ourselves in the place we do, and how is it that our bodies and our histories seem to coincide in some ways with the very things that they're preaching about. So I'm not a theologian. I'm an academic scientist, social and biological scientist. I have no sort of real stake in what priests do or don't do. However, I recognize the real importance of the role of a priest in a community, not just in the church, but actually as a member and as a leader in broader communities, that people look to priests for answers or to maybe help them ask better questions. And it's that area that I think the scientists and the priests can have a dialogue. How do we think through together maybe these kinds of questions? And how do we get a range of answers that become very relevant to the community, that draw on different types of information, different bodies of knowledge? And so as a scientist, I think it's critical that what we do become available, translated to a broader public. But for priests, a collaboration with scientists might open some doors for them, for the way in which they engage their community, but it also might help the scientists. One of the things that's really important is that science is the world. Science is not a thing, it's a method, right? It's a way of asking questions about the world. When seminarians are deep in their training, when they're really exploring how to be with and to help others be with the world, science is a tool. It's information. It's a way to help think through these things. But it shouldn't start and stop with a course or maybe 2 lectures or a nifty video. It should actually be part of formation, I would argue, because science is about the world around us and trying to explore, trying to think about truths and how do we get close to them. And the ability for seminarians and ordained priests to dialogue with scientists, to join others in this sort of quest to discover the truth that's out there, can really facilitate a kind of dialogue and an openness, not just in church communities, but in the larger public, to thinking through these things as partners in the quest for truth and not antagonists. One of the most repugnant and damaging myths in our society is the myth that the difference between peoples that we categorize as races, black, white, Asian, whatever, Latino, that those differences are rooted in biological realities, that there are different clusters of ways of being human. One is white, one is black, one is Asian, and that these different ways have deep evolutionary histories. Okay, that's a myth. It's completely untrue. The genetics demonstrate that. The physiology demonstrates that. Our understanding of medical processes demonstrate that. And yet this myth is so pervasive and so powerful. So what do we do about that? This is where science can really help across the board. When we understand what human biology tells us, we can't see black, white, and Asian except as a construction that's placed on the amazing diversity of humanity, a way to divide us up, a way to keep us down. So by understanding human biology, we can lift ourselves back up in one way, hand in hand with different kinds of knowledges, notions of social justice, notions of ethics and morality. How do we think about others, and how do we think about inequality? If that inequality is not based in biology, if that inequality is not natural as part of being human, then we can change it. We can ameliorate it. We can make the world a better place. Understanding the biology of human diversity helps us destroy the myth of race. One of the most damaging aspects of this broad myth of gender, that men and women are from different planets, men from Mars and women from Venus, one of the most damaging myths about gender is that we are two different kinds of things, that we don't overlap, that we don't feel the same, think the same, and experience the same world. Obviously, there's cultural differences for being male or being female, but the overlap is so much more than anyone gives us as humans credit for. Think about this. When you experience something as a human being. When we talk about something, we try to categorize that into a gender or a race or an age. Those all have impacts, but they're not really talking about what it means to be human. They're not really letting us understand individuals as members of our species and members of the human race. So when we try to categorize someone as being very masculine or very feminine, or talk about this gender's capacity for that or that gender's capacity for the other, let's actually step back and ask a question. One, what do the data tell us? Well, on almost every psychological and biological variable, males and females overlap 78% or more. So it's really hard to take an individual at random, identify some characteristic, and call that person male or female. Now, obviously there's some important biological differences between males and females, and we're very happy for them. But that doesn't mean that the way we feel, the way we interact, the way we see one another is divided strictly along that line. We're all humans, and there's a lot of interesting variation. We should be happy for that variation, but gender is not always as divisive as we think it is. A great way to think about how problematic gender can be sometimes is the phrase, "he throws like a girl." Let's think about this for a moment. When I was very excited as a young boy to play baseball, because I'd played soccer before that, I joined a little league team. And immediately, after picking up a ball and throwing it, everyone started laughing and say, "Oh, you throw like a girl." I was of course, very hurt. But now I recognize they were totally wrong. What I did was pick up a ball, do this with my arm, and move it forward. It turns out that biologically, that's throwing like a human. So I was throwing like a human. Why did they say I was throwing like a girl? Well, because the boys had been trained to do this big pitching arm rotation thing, which is a very weird way to throw for a human. In fact, it destroys your rotator cuff. That's why pitchers have so many problems. So I was not throwing like a girl. I was throwing like a human being. But that gives us a real good insight into what gender is and how damaging it can be. To classify boy as better than girl in this one physical act not only is incorrect, but it ranks them against each other in a really negative way. If any of you have gone to see women's softball or any women's sport, you know that women can throw. So next time, don't say he throws like a girl. Say, wow, you throw like a human being. There's another really pernicious and problematic myth. This is the myth that for men, the go-to problem solving in all cases is violence and aggression. This whole idea that really at the heart of every male is Mr. Hyde to their Dr. Jekyll, that when challenged, it is men who fight and aggress against one another. Now, first of all, many of you are men. You know that's not true. Second of all, why do we think that? Why is this so important? Well, if we look at the data, people say, well, it's because males are very aggressive. Are they? Are males really more aggressive than females? The data paint a very complicated picture. What we need to understand here is that the human go-to is actually cooperation and collaboration, not aggression. Sure, a lot of men fight. A lot of women fight too. So what we need to really ask is, what is it that guys do on a regular basis? How do they interact with one another? Do we emphasize aggression in society for men and de-emphasize it for women? Yeah, we do. So it's no surprise when we find males being a little bit more aggressive than females on average. But if we think about the physiological structure, the hormones, the muscles, males have a great capacity to exhibit aggression. But that's not what men do day in and day out throughout our entire evolutionary history. No, rather, men, just like all humans, get along, and they do it really, really well. Speaking to this group, it's a little different from a lot of the different kind of public lectures or academic lectures that I give, because in some ways, thinking with this same concept, what I talked about, the human evolution and cooperation, collaboration, compassion, means something, I think, a little bit more deeply in the kind of practice and interests that this group had. The idea that they're involved in formation, that they're involved in bringing people along to do this incredibly important set of things for their lifetime, means that they're looking to hold on to think about, and to engage with ideas and knowledge in a way that's maybe a little different from a general public lecture that I give to academics or to grade school kids. One thing about this group that really impressed me is their really openness and sincere devotion to thinking through science and faith and formation and trying to navigate how those things can come together to make a difference.